Pastor, we've talked about some of the changes and the reasons behind those things, what it's going to look like at the church, what you're going to be doing. But obviously people have questions that they would like to know about. So let's get into some of those things, if you would.
Certainly.
Number one question, there's another pastor in this mix who is going through a transition.
Yes.
And that's Pastor David Jones. What can you tell us about that?
I can tell you that Pastor David Jones and his wife Heather are praying earnestly during this season of consecration for God's direction. They really are. And that's a good place to be. The fact that we have a man and a woman who are people of prayer, people of consecration, and they're asking God for direction. And they wanted that conveyed to the congregation. They are looking to God for direction for their lives. And I stand with them 100%. I'm looking for God's direction for their lives as well.
What will be done during this time by you, by the elder board, to prevent there from being a vacuum in leadership? Obviously, when there's a senior pastor change, there's going to be a change in vision, direction to some degree. But how will we keep that from being detrimental to the church during this transition?
And the answer to that question has to do with me, particularly, and that is my staying in my role, my continuing to do what I've done for the past 10.5 years, to be the senior pastor. My focus is not just on where I'm going to be going in the future, and my focus is also here in the future of this church. So it's very critical that I maintain my commitment and my focus to Cross Points Church, so that there's not going to be a vacuum, there's not going to be a lame duck senior pastor in the pulpit. And that's critical. It's very important.
So while this search process goes on, until that person is identified and put in place, you will continue to lead as senior pastor.
That is accurate. That is accurate.
Can you tell us a little bit about the search? Generally speaking, how is this going to work? It's different looking for a children's pastor, looking for a youth pastor. We have other people that can fill in those roles as they've happened over the last few years. How is this going to look?
Well, it was important that it be announced on January 22nd, the beginning of our consecration, that I tendered my resignation. And one of the reasons why it was important was that once it's understood that my resignation is in place, now we are free to begin the searching process. We are free to begin to interview. We're free to make it known that we are receiving applications and we're talking with people. And so that's very important to understand that. Excuse me. Secondly, we do have a committee of people, a board of elders, and we are committed to expediting the whole process as quickly as possible, without compromise and without taking shortcuts. We're meeting weekly. We're also taking time when we deem it necessary to meet Sunday afternoons. We've also taken time other evenings of the week other than Tuesday to meet regarding this matter, because we understand the importance of it and how important it is that we are thorough and that we are efficient in finding that person. And so we're not going to break our pace. We're not going to slow down. We've been meeting on this level regularly and consistently for several months, and we're going to continue as we put together strategies to find that person.
And as you're going through this process, how is information going to be communicated to the church? Will it be email, bulletin updates, announcements?
We're going to certainly announce from the pulpit Sunday mornings as to where we are and at what stage of this search are we. We'll be communicating that. We can also utilize our website as well to convey that. We want people to know that the search is active, is ongoing, and that we haven't reached some lull in which nothing's going on. We want to communicate that on a consistent basis.
So the best way for people to stay informed is going to be in service.
Be in service. Be on time. In service. As well as occasionally, and like I said, we may utilize, hasn't been confirmed yet, but we might utilize also the website.
Just as we're doing with these videos right now.
Certainly. Certainly.
How will we address the loss of Pastor Doug in regards to the areas of leadership and the ministries that he has been involved in?
This is a very good question. And there are going to be questions that I can't answer because we haven't found answers yet. But this is what our posture is. Number one, we see that there are, Pastor Doug has identified and raised up volunteers that have worked with him occasionally, that have background in accounting, and we, in terms of the finances, and so we're going to utilize those individuals, probably more so now than we did before. Also, we're going to give some of the responsibilities to remaining pastors, and so we'll be working a little harder, all of us as a team, and we're going to be soliciting, perhaps, involvement from the congregation, people that we're not aware that they have giftings, what have you, in the area that will be needed. But we're going to be soliciting for support. Now, certainly there are going to be issues that he was involved with that we don't have answers for.
Mm-hmm.
He also counseled, so that's going to fall on the backs of some of the other pastors, pick up some of that counseling responsibility that Pastor Doug walked in. Pastor Doug wore big shoes. And it's going to take a lot to fill those shoes. And so we need to work together.
It was clearly stated in the announcement on the 22nd that the reason for his position going away, Pastor Doug,
Yes.
is in regards to the financial picture of the church.
That is accurate.
Everybody loves talking about the good and exciting things. But it's not always as much fun to talk about the more difficult things. But this is important.
Mm-hmm.
How will we, going forward, begin to change that financial picture? What can we do as a church to change that financial picture?
Well, one thing we can do is that we can be more consistent, we mean the senior pastor and myself, in teaching and preaching on giving. The reality is that the Bible teaches that tithes and offerings were and are a part of the Christian's life. And you consider that we're being told now by reliable sources, several reliable sources, that there's only 4% of Christians that actually consistently tithe here in the United States. That is incomprehensible. That only 4% of Christians tithe. Now, how that reflects in our own congregation, I can't answer that. I don't know if anybody can. But we certainly want to make sure that people are aware of the fact that tithing and giving offerings was and is a privilege that God has given us, a privilege and a responsibility. And so addressing that in our messages is important. Certainly continuing to pray about our finances. During the week of consecration, that was one of the areas that we prayed about very earnestly, and that is God would help us to get rid of the debt that we have, and also that the finances would roll in terms of supporting the church, the staff, what have you.
Mm-hmm. And obviously people can't do things that they haven't been told about, taught about, so that's
Exactly.
where the teaching about tithing comes back into play.
It certainly does.
But then it's all our responsibilities, whether we're staff members or not, to do our part in giving our tithes and our offerings.
And that is how God has structured things for the support of the church, is through tithes and offerings.
Absolutely. Well, Pastor, first of all, thank you for explaining these things in detail with us and for answering these questions. One final question. Lots of big changes, lots of things going to be going on. How would you direct people, if any congregation member was to come and sit down in your office and say, how would you direct me to pray for you, for the staff, for the elders, and for this church? What would you say to them?
I probably would say something along these lines. That I can see Cross Points is poised to transition to a new orbit, a more exciting orbit. I think that the future of Cross Points is brighter than the past. That's not a derogatory way, a slap on the past by any stretch of the imagination. I just see great days for Cross Points. I honestly do. That's not a positive spin on something. I just see bright, great days for the future of this house, this church. God loves Cross Points. It's had a major role in this community, and has served this community very, very well. So I would have them pray I've mentioned in the past, I see myself as somewhat of a Moses who has brought the church through the wilderness, as it were. And when I say wilderness, I'm not reflecting on the condition of the church by any stretch of the imagination, but this is what I am saying. As a Moses, I see a time for a Joshua to come who will take the church into the promised land. And that is what excites me. I see someone who is has a different gift mix than I have, different perspective, very suitable for this culture, this congregation, and has the energy, and who's been called by God to take them into the promised land. And that excites me. So I would say pray about that. Pray that the person that God brings is strategically prepared. Pray that we truly do become a praying church, a house of prayer. Because we don't want to go anywhere without being a praying congregation. Pray that the foundations that have been laid, first by the founding pastor Ernie Gruen, and then Nick Jordan, Hal Linhart, and me, that those foundation stones will be stood upon and that they will make a difference.
Absolutely.
That's what I would say.
Well, thank you so much, and we look forward to hearing more as the search progresses,
Yes,
and
sir.
also more about what God is going to be doing in your life.
Thank you.